Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 155 of the Healthy Skin Show. This episode today is for all of my friends and listeners out there who have a ton of allergies and you present with your skin issues in a very allergic fashion. So what that means is you're very itchy, you might develop hives, you probably use like Zyrtec or Allegra or Benadryl, and you seem to be allergic to a lot of things in your environment, maybe pets, all sorts of foods, that kind of thing, and it seems to be getting worse. So what I'm not talking about today is food sensitivities, and we'll clarify the reason why in this episode. However, this particular podcast is all about something called oral allergies and cross-reactivity of pollen allergies. So if you're like, what? I urge you to tune in because you're going to learn a lot today. And as a bonus, I've got an amazing handout for you that is very detailed that will help really guide you through this process. You can check it out in the show notes today. But my guest today is Rakhi Roy. You guys may remember her. She was a guest a few weeks ago on the show, and she talked all about her own eczema journey and how she has been dealing with a load of allergic type issues for most of her life. And we got talking before we actually recorded that episode, and she shared with me a lot of information about allergies and how that can also show up as hives, issues with like feeling like your mouth is fuzzy, all sorts of stuff. And I thought, let's actually talk about this because it's something that a lot of people are not aware of. And it's really, really important if you're trying to figure out why you're so itchy, why your hives keep popping out. And this may also help explain why you feel as if your pollen allergies have gotten so much worse. It is really insightful, and I'm very grateful to have Rakhi back joining us. And for those of you who didn't yet tune in to Rakhi's previous episode, allow me a moment to introduce you to her. Rakhi Roy Chowdhury holds a master's degree in Dietetics and Nutrition and a bachelor's degree in Anthropology and Theatre. She's an actress turned registered dietitian with more allergies than the average person. Her theater and film career had to take a backseat because of her constant eczema flare-ups that have prevented her from going to auditions and booking work. After realizing that nutrition played a pivotal role in managing her eczema, she embraced a changing career to devote her time to helping others like herself. She's now a board-licensed registered dietitian nutritionist and helps others manage their skin conditions, balance digestive issues, and follow their bliss. Thanks, Rakhi, so much for coming back to the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited.
Well, yeah, and I'm excited to talk about this topic because I have found it really surprising that a lot of clients are unfamiliar with this concept of something called oral allergy syndrome and cross-reactivity within allergy. I don't even know what you call them. They're like allergen groups. I'm not families, what have you.
Food families.
Food families and pollen families and all sorts of things. And so basically, what they typically will say is, well, when I have, I'm just going to say like zucchini or plums, which is a stone fruit, my mouth gets kind of like itchy and as you were saying before we started recording this, kind of fuzzy feeling. And so can you talk a little bit about what's going on when someone eats a food, and it could even be berries, it can be a lot of different things, and they start to get this reaction in their mouth, but to them it doesn't seem like an actual allergic reaction. Like, what exactly is that?
Correct. So food allergies are like lifelong, threatening, can be permanent. You know, your symptoms can be hives, vomiting. It can affect your breathing, that sort of thing. Now, oral allergy syndrome is a little bit more of a milder allergy. It usually never results in a life-threatening reaction. It might be really uncomfortable, there are instances where people will just eat the food and their mouth gets really itchy. Their throat doesn't necessarily close up, but they might start wheezing a little bit. And that's because the body is actually confusing the fruit or the vegetable for the pollen in the pollen family. Mm-hmm. So for example, birch, a lot of times it's very commonly reactive with apples, carrots, celery, cherries, kiwi fruit, peaches, pears, and plums.
Oh,
so that's
my
the birch.
Goodness, what a list.
But I actually there is hope though, because birch tends to be more prominent. The pollen tends to be more prominent in the springtime. And so in the summer, the late summer, fall time, you might actually be okay with it. My own father, he has a issue with cherries, so he stays clear of them in the spring, but during like the winter seasons, he can have.
Oh, interesting.
So, and the other thing though is the protein gets denatured when you do heat it or you put it in acid. So, for example, myself, I can't have a raw apple, but if it's cooked in, say, like an apple pie, the heat denatures it because you baked it. And then my body doesn't recognize the protein and I don't have that reaction. A lot of times you can also peel the skin. So if you peel the skin, the proteins a lot of times are in the skin. So you can do it that way. What other? Oh, so like I said, acid. So you know those little snack packs at the grocery store where the apples are kind of peeled, or you might be familiar with it. Whoever goes to like McDonald's and the little kids meals.
Yeah, and they have them at different convenience stores too, and they'll have like a little peanut butter cup or sunflower butter cup or whatever.
Yeah. So in those instances, I always tell people, like, you might not have a true allergy, right? You always, of course, I say, refer to your allergist, immunologist, do a test first before you try it out on your own. But almost always, when it comes to these types of fruits and vegetables, it's usually an oral allergy syndrome. So you might be safe to try the apple and the baked pie or the one that's in the snack packs because it's usually preserved in like a citric acid.
Right. And so basically the issue here is that some people are finding that there's these like random foods that are causing this weird oral issue. And they're like, well, it's funny when I dig, I'm like, but what about this? Oh yeah, that too. And a client recently shared with me that he discovered a pretty severe ragweed allergy, and ragweed is related to stevia. And stevia is a sweetener that's in a lot of supplements and protein powders and all sorts of things for people that want to avoid, cane sugar and extra sugar because they don't want to spike their blood sugar, but they want it sweeter. And so, we were also saying too that calendula is another herb that's in that family as well. Calendula is an herb that oftentimes is used in different skincare formulations because it can be a very healing herb, but for some people, they may react to it because, again, they're allergic to ragweed. And so can you talk a little bit about what are some of these different classes? So you mentioned birch, and what are some others that you're familiar with?
So there's birch, there's ragweed, and there's grass. So like the ragweed you mentioned, the calendula, I believe there is also a relation to dandelion as well in there somewhere. So yes, it's like all these herbal teas that you're told are so great for you, especially, for skin and liver support, you might have a reaction to. And I feel like a lot of people continue to take these products thinking that this is supposed to be helping them. And it's, they would never guess it's this. But when you have no rhyme or reason, you don't know what to look for. It's a mystery. So when you find out the connections in the families, like the grass, the ragweed, the birch, and knowing what seasons they're more active, you can actually find it at the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. If you go to their website, they have like this beautiful list of all these foods, and you can see what seasons that they're actually more active. So that means you don't have to, avoid it lifelong. Another one that's really interesting is latex. If you have a latex allergy, you might have a reaction to banana, avocado, chestnuts, kiwi, figs, apples, and cherries. Now, those are more oral allergy syndrome, not as severe, but I was at a conference where an allergist did present on cross-reactivities for severe allergies, specifically peanuts.
Okay.
And I can talk about that if you're interested.
I think people would love to hear that because there's a lot of people that have nut allergies, a lot of moms with kids who listen that have nut allergies, and peanuts are off the table. So what does that entail?
So, and I found this out, unfortunately, through my own experience. So peanut allergies, I think it's like 1 in 10 people that have a peanut allergy. So in America, I think the numbers were, if you go on the Food and Allergy Research website, I think the number is somewhere around 6 million people have a peanut allergy. Now, on there, you'll also find that people who have a peanut allergy have a 5% chance of also having a severe reaction to soybeans, legumes, lentils, peas, and chickpeas. And it was really funny because in my own experience, when this has happened so many times, I can now tell that there's like chickpeas or peas in this. But I used to have a favorite ice cream, and it was a dairy-free ice cream. If anyone's familiar with the brand So Delicious. So it's just coconut milk, really great. And then all of a sudden they changed their formula because now food companies are trying to put more protein into their products, to market the protein content. So, and because they understand a lot of people are probably vegan who are buying their products, they end up not putting, whey protein in there. They end up putting vegan sources. And a great vegan source right now of protein is pea protein. So that was an unfortunate event for me to find out. There's so many other times where it's like I was thinking like I had a gluten-free pizza or a gluten-free gnocchi at a restaurant, and I didn't even think to ask them like what is the flour they use, and it was like chickpea flour. So this does not affect everyone, but it is something to look out for, especially if there's a higher rise in peanut allergies. I know that's being reported. This is something to be mindful of.
And I think this is a good question. So this isn't like we're not talking about anaphylaxis here in this particular conversation. We're more talking about this oral allergy issue and cross-reactivity. But from your personal experience, is there a crossover between exposing yourself, like say you have a ragweed allergy and you consume stevia, not knowing that they're connected? Is it possible that you could have issues on your skin as a result, even though, like I said, most of the time for a lot of people, it's just what's going on in their mouth. Like they're like, oh, my mouth feels really funny. I don't, like you said, maybe they start to wheeze. What's your thoughts on that as far as a connection to the skin?
So from my research and also personal experience, it's usually just limited to hives or just itchiness. It usually doesn't transpire into eczema. However, there is a research study that I was reading on I can't quote which, it was like the Clinical Allergy Journal. And they did find that only 1% of people who have eczema also have like a peanut and a soybean allergy. That's the only one that they found a connection to eczema or rashes. But most of the studies I found with oral allergy syndrome, it's usually just hives.
Okay. So, and could the hives be full body or in just particular spots or just around the mouth?
Yeah, it can be full body.
Oh, wow. So this could actually be an explanation for some people as to why they're developing hives randomly. And they're like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. I wasn't exposed to birch. I wasn't outside. And yet they ate something that was cross-reactive in the birch pollen family, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is, it's like a trend that I see. It's like, only eat raw food. Like raw food is healthier than cooked. And I'm like, sometimes actually that might cause an issue for somebody. And don't forget juices. There's a lot of juices. Like I mentioned, celery is in birch family. So, the popularity of a lot of juices incorporating celery into their products can be a problem. And, it's really funny when people say they don't feel good. I've heard this so many times. They don't feel good drinking like a celery juice, like their stomach gets upset. I'm like, you might actually have an oral allergy syndrome. Like if you feel like you're vomiting, that's one of the symptoms of oral allergy syndrome. You might have a reaction. So my advice for people is to definitely make sure you're going to an allergist immunologist to check what your environmental allergies are, because it's not always that you're going to have a positive reaction to food, but the environmental allergies can be clues to cross-reactivities in food in relation to oral allergy syndrome.
And just and obviously you're not an immunologist or an allergist, but you've gone through this yourself. Any thoughts on if someone does go to an allergist or an immunologist, what would be like, is the patch test something that you find or through research seems to be the best way? Is blood, IgE values better? Any thoughts on that?
So it's actually a combination of all three from what I found in the research. There is no set standardized test for oral allergy syndrome at the moment, unfortunately. So you do really need to go to an experienced allergist, someone who's actually an immunologist who actually does the research, and they need to kind of weigh the options of looking at all three. They will probably put you under an oral test, like a challenge test. That's kind of, unfortunately, the gold standard sometimes, just to see if there's a reaction. You'll be kept, in the office for a couple hours, and they'll monitor your symptoms. Now, there are studies being done that are underway that they're trying to actually do oral immunotherapy, so that way you don't have to endlessly avoid these foods for life. The short term is obviously to cook it down, like I said, to denature the proteins. But, I'm thinking long term, as more studies come out and more research is done, that hopefully there will be, some relief for people that they don't need to avoid it.
Yeah. And I also want to clarify, because a lot of times people get the terms allergy intolerance and sensitivity very confused. We are talking about allergies here. Okay. So this is not like you ate something today and 4 days later you had a headache. Those delayed reactions tend to be more quote unquote sensitivities, whereas an intolerance has to do with you being missing or low on a particular enzyme like lactase, right? We all know of the lactose intolerance, right? So this is very different. This is looking at a different part of your immune system. It's not the same as saying I'm gluten sensitive or I'm sensitive to dairy. This is very different. And I think it is important that people take these things seriously. I think any type of allergy, especially if you're constantly exposing yourself, and this is just my personal opinion, I tend to be very cautious. Even when it comes to oral allergy syndrome, I think a lot of people are kind of flippant about it. It doesn't matter, not a big deal. And I'm like, you don't even carry Benadryl with you in your bag? I just kind of think sometimes people don't take these things as seriously as they should, because it could be one time where your body is just like, nope. And then you've got an anaphylactic problem and it's something random that you wouldn't have expected. So I just think it's important to identify these types of issues and better understand that your body is reactive to things, and knowing, it's obvious that now that knowing those environmental allergies could be really important. And I also think it's a great point that you brought up that in this particular case, if you do have oral allergy syndrome, cooking the foods is one easy way to get around this. So it stinks if like blueberries or cherries are your favorite. Well, you just kind of cook them a little bit, and now you don't have as big of an issue.
Yeah, put them in your pancake. That's what I do. It's delicious.
Exactly. You're like, I can do it now. I'm curious, like with grasses, the grass family, just out of curiosity, if you know, is it like any grasses, or are there different groups based off of the different types of grass allergies that there are?
The ones that are on the American Academy of Allergy and Asthma Immunology website, they specify Timothy and orchard grass.
Yeah.
So that's the one where, and I'll kind of like list off what they have. So the Timothy and orchard grass sometimes will be reactive, mostly in the summer is what they find. And it'll be peach, cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon, basically all the melons.
Oh.
And then it'll be kiwi, tomato, and let's see, celery again, and actually white potato. White
Oh,
potato.
that's interesting. So somebody who might think that it's an issue with nightshades, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
bunch of nightshades in there. It might
Yeah.
not actually be the nightshades. It could be something like this.
Absolutely.
Wow, it's unfortunate. This is very interesting, but I can tell. I just know some people are probably like, oh, this makes it so much more muddy. Like, what exactly is going
You know
on?
what? I have so many people who are like, this makes so much sense
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
It's like, it's not in my head. I have had so many people when I brought this up to them where I'm like, you don't need to actually avoid all these foods. You just got to cook it down. But it's like, these are the relations. And they look at me like, oh, my life has just come together now, because no one's really talking. I really don't think a lot of doctors even understand oral allergy syndrome. You won't really hear it from a primary care physician. I actually never heard it from my allergist. It's really weird. Never. Like in my years of growing up, I never heard of it. The first time I actually heard of it was when I went to this conference a few years ago. But I already put the puzzle pieces together on my own. And then it was just kind of confirmed.
And so, since you have a lot of issues personally, I think it's helpful for people to know that aside from cooking these foods down, you and I both share the same concern. And especially with skin issues, people can go on pretty excessive elimination diets. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to take this out. Look at these lists. These are like some really healthy foods.
Absolutely.
That would be sad if someone just thought, well, I've got to avoid all of this. So what is one of the steps that you plan on taking for yourself that maybe somebody who's dealing with a lot of these different issues might want to consider?
Oh, yeah. So definitely I don't want to ever have to avoid all these, delicious fruits and vegetables the rest of my life. There's currently oral immunotherapy that's being researched. So that's something that I definitely plan on going to an immunologist to get this handled as well. They do say that having allergy shots might help lessen, your quote unquote immune system bucket. So I used to get allergy shots for years when I was younger. And so that might actually, by default, if you lower your reaction to burps per se during spring season, it might actually help you, when you're eating that food too at the same time.
And so basically when you're saying, and because I just want to make sure people understand what this means. So they're exposing you to small amounts of the allergen to help your system become less reactive.
Right. The hope is for you to build up a tolerance. So they will, and this is monitored under, supervision of a qualified professional, and they will be exposing you to small doses of this in the office until, they feel like you're at a tolerable threshold. A lot of times this does take at least a minimum of a year. I've seen that, it's not going to be happening overnight, but it's definitely an option.
Yeah. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for even mentioning this to me, because when you had shared with me, it's so funny. This came up because I forget what we were talking about, and then you had said, "Do you want to share the story real quick about the mixed drink that you had?" And that's kind of how this whole conversation got started, and it's so random, but it goes back to the chickpea issue you mentioned earlier.
Yes. So I think Jen had posted something on her Instagram about Aquafaba.
Yes. So that's the chickpea water. Like when you drain the can of chickpeas or you cook them, you'll end up with this kind of thicker, slightly, I don't know, it becomes slightly more gelatinous as it cools, but usually it's just a thicker water, and it's called Aquafaba.
Yep. Yeah. So I never knew what Aquafaba was, but when I was finishing grad school, I was doing my master's down in Miami for my dietetics degree. They actually get really fancy with their drinks down there. I don't know if anyone's ever gone to Miami. It is fun. So their bars don't, I love a tequila sour. And I used to order tequila sours that use just like a sour mix, meaning like it was, that artificial like lemon, lime, whatever, and maybe like red dye, who knows what's in there. And this one time I ordered a tequila sour, the true way a tequila sour gets made is actually with Aquafaba, because they have to make the top of it foam. So they put it in the shaker, and the Aquafaba starts to expand. It's very much like, I would say almost like egg whites.
Yes, and it's used in vegan cooking like egg whites.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. So they did that, and on the top it was very foamy and pretty, and I was like, oh, this is cool. The moment I took like 2 sips, my stomach hurt so bad. I knew I had to throw up. And my body, it's kind of like a
Oh,
memory.
no.
Allergies are
Yeah.
very much like memories. And I was like, I know for a fact I probably had something that had chickpeas or like something peanut related.
Mm-hmm.
And because my body will react the same way every single time. And allergies, of course, are very dangerous because you can one day, knock on wood, I've never had to use an EpiPen for this situation, but you can have a very, lethal reaction the more times you're exposed to this. And so my every single time my body has had more and more of a violent reaction. So it's come to the point where now I do have to carry around a card with me or put on my phone my allergies. Like if I'm ever going to a Mediterranean restaurant, there's like one time I was in the airport of Dubai and they were making pizza. It wasn't even, I asked them, like, did you make this pizza out of something? But, it was just literally in the vicinity of where they were making it. And chickpeas is very relevant there. So
Yes.
that was, yeah.
Yes. So that's what started this whole conversation. I was like, we should talk about this because it is an issue for more and more people. And a lot of people are unaware of what oral allergy syndrome is. And until you really showed me the extensiveness of these families based off of what type of allergies you have, I didn't even know, because I don't work with people that have severe allergies. So it wasn't something that was even like really my wheelhouse per se. And I'm like, we need to talk about this because this may really help open some people's eyes who are struggling, especially from a lot of these issues that are more allergic, hives, itchiness, etc., to hopefully find a better balance with their body, with their diet, and make peace with food ultimately, and know that there are ways around this. But I think it's great that you're also educating people about it and your own experience, because if you do have serious allergies, you're right, you got to take it seriously. And sometimes you need to carry like a little card or something on your phone that you can show people that's in different languages when you travel, to make sure that you're not accidentally exposing yourself to something that could ultimately one day, and we don't know when that day is, cause a major issue. But at least for now, this, I think, gives people a good semblance of what they need to consider. So if you have any of these allergies, right, you're like, oh yeah, I'm really allergic to birch pollen or these grasses or ragweed, etc., this may be a good opportunity for you to dig deeper and say, let me check out this website to look at these lists and see if some bells start ringing in your head about, oh, that's a problem. That's a problem. Oh yeah. And
I also want to add, of course you can go to the website that I had mentioned for American Allergy and Asthma Immunology. They have the list. You can download the PDF. If you do have environmental allergies, I do recommend downloading an app. It's called AllergyCast. I think it's made by Zyrtec. And what's really nice is you track 5 days of your symptoms, and they'll tell you outside if it's, high, moderate, or mild for, like, I think today, like I live in Florida, so it's high for grass, for example. And so I will track my symptoms, and then it will usually tell me something, an allergy impact score. So on those days, I know maybe I should probably avoid, what's probably being grown in season, or at least cook down the foods. And then, of course, like I said, long term, you do want to go to an immunologist and see if you can actually handle this more long, rather than short-term avoidance. And then there's another app, I think it's called My Food Symptom Diary, because I think the most important thing for a lot of people is not just writing down what you're eating, but you have to know what you're looking for. So now that you know what the clues are, you can kind of piece them together, because for the longest time, there was no rhyme or reason for me. I'm like, I'm just randomly reacting to apricots and apples. What is that? Like, it never made sense. And then all of a sudden it kind of came together.
I know. And I'm hoping that this conversation will put those pieces together for a lot of the people listening. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us again. And everybody can go find Rakhi. As I said, she's a dietitian. She's a lot of experience with eczema, especially because she is living that life. She is an amazing eczema warrior herself. So she has a lot of empathy for people that are struggling with that. Her website is littleblissnutrition.com. And she's also got a great Instagram. If you're over there, it's gut.skin.nutritionist. So Rakhi, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jen. I appreciate it too.
I hope that you guys have found this episode as interesting as I have. I know it's a little nerdy, but you know what? It's incredibly eye-opening to people who have been struggling with allergies or who didn't know that whole fuzzy, itchy mouth thing was a thing. Now you know. That's actually a big deal, and it's important to mention that to your practitioners because so many botanicals, especially if you're going the more alternative route, tend to cross-react with some of these pollen allergen groups, and you want to make sure to probably avoid those formulas that may include the suspect ingredients. I tried to find a list online to share with you guys that was as comprehensive as humanly possible, and you know what? We failed. We couldn't find one. So instead, I did a ton of research and put together a guide for you guys that is very comprehensive. So you can look up your pollen allergies, the specific ones you have, and then it references which specific foods, botanicals, herbs, spices, etc. that all could be a problem. This resource, along with all of the links and everything else we discussed, you can find over in the show notes at skinterrupt.com/115. There you can download my allergen cross-reactivity e-guide, and you can leave any questions and comments. That way we can keep the conversation going. And if you know someone who is struggling with a lot of pollen allergies, this would be a great episode to share with them. Believe it or not, regardless of whether they have skin issues or not, because this applies to people in general that are dealing or struggling with a lot of allergies. And so it's my hope that at least for our skin community, this will help those out there who are really, really struggling and really need some help. They're relying heavily on antihistamines and potentially not getting a lot of relief. And before you head out for your day, take a moment, if you haven't done so yet, to rate and review The Healthy Skin Show. Share your experience. It could be on this particular episode or the show in general. That way, someone seeking a new show, looking for answers, could be inspired by your experience and be connected with answers that they've been searching for. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.